Hello there. Welcome to Whispers.exe, where the silence watches back. The following story is a work of fiction created for atmospheric and entertainment purposes. With that being said, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the dark settle in. It begins like most things do, quiet, unnoticed, and far too late to stop. The orchard cries at night. I returned to the orchard in early autumn, when the evenings stretched thin and the daylight clung to every surface like a reluctant goodbye. The trees looked smaller than I remembered, though I knew they had not shrunk. Only my certainty had. Rows once neat had buckled, trunks bending slightly toward the center as if they conspired in secret. Daylight revealed nothing except disrepair. Branches bore no fruit, only brittle leaves freckled with sickness. The air smelled of turned soil and a lingering, almost metallic damp. I told myself the rumors were only that rumors, words inflated by distance and dread. Yet the memory of those parents, pale-faced and frantic, still echoed. A child crying, always just beyond reach, they said, always at night. I set my pack beside the old tool shed and began unloading the cameras. 6 motion-activated units, each with infrared vision and audio. They whirred awake like small, obedient creatures. The plan was simple. Mount the cameras before dusk, leave them to watch, and return to town by sunrise to review the footage. I would do this for 7 nights. 7 felt safe, biblical, complete. By the 5th rusted nail, sweat glazed my neck despite the cool. A bee circled lazily, then drifted off, its buzz swallowed by a silence so perfect it felt pre-stressed. Even in daylight, the orchard lacked wind. Leaves hung suspended, angling toward a breeze that never came. When they moved, it was only by the weight of my gaze, or so it seemed. I finished wiring the last camera, checked battery levels twice, and spoke aloud, half a joke, half a plea, "Behave." My voice struck the trunks and fell flat, no echo. Night arrived without ceremony. A low mist seeped between branches, erasing the horizon until only a pale band of sky remained, a bruise upon the dark. I retreated to the caretaker's cottage, a squat structure of rotting cedar, and unrolled my sleeping bag on the floorboards. The boards kept an old scent: apples, dust, kerosene, sorrow. I left the front door ajar. I told myself it was for air, though I feared maybe it was so I wouldn't have to hear it creak open later. I waited. The hush outside grew weighty, as if sound itself had retreated deeper among the roots. Then a thin sob, distant, the voice small and wet as morning dew. It wavered once, paused, then returned, stretching into a drawn-out lament. It did not echo. It moved, first east, then close to the northern rows, as though the orchard itself was pulling the child along by invisible fingers. I did not move. My own breath took on the rhythm of the crying. Inhale with its rise, exhale with its soft collapse. My pulse slowed to match. Minutes or hours passed, time lost tether. Eventually the crying faded beyond the farthest row, swallowed in the soil. Morning light peeled the mist away. I stepped outside, unsure if I'd slept. Dew glistened on every trunk, though the sky had offered no rain. I gathered the SD cards from each camera like plucking fruit. A subtle tremor moved through the ground as I pulled the last one free, too faint to be seismic, too certain to ignore. Back in town, the coffee shop clattered with dishes and familiar chatter. Their brightness felt foreign. I slipped headphones on and pressed play. First hour, nothing but crickets. Second hour, the camera facing the east road jolted awake, motion detected, yet the image showed only trees. They were swaying, gentle, synchronized. There was no wind. I leaned closer. The branches tipped left, paused, tipped right, like metronomes guiding an unseen choir. Then came the audio, soft sobs precisely in rhythm with each sway. The sound grew, hovered, collapsed, grew again. But in the video, no figure stirred. I replayed the minute 10 times, isolating, adjusting brightness, no change. The trees conducted their silent orchestra alone. I shivered. Inside the cafe, midday sun brimming through glass. Night 2, I arrived earlier. Cameras reset. I brought a wind gauge and pinned it to a post, zero movement. I sat outside, lantern dimmed, recorder in hand. The orchard loomed, statues waiting for purpose. The crying began sooner. A single wail, sharper, edged with loneliness too practiced to be new. This time, the sobbing drifted closer, weaving between rows until it reached the fringe of the open clearing where I sat. I spoke, voice barely above thought. Are you hurt? The crying stopped. A hush deeper than silence pressed against my eardrums, making them pop as if descending quickly in an airplane. Leaves lifted. Not many, just a few near my feet, fluttering upward against gravity, flickering like dying moths before settling again. I froze. My recorder captured a subtle sound beneath my seatboards, a heartbeat, slow, ancient, pulsing through the ground itself. The orchard inhaled, I felt it in my teeth. When dawn grained the sky, the crying had not resumed. Reviewing footage revealed something new. At 3:17 a.m., the camera facing the cottage door brightened faintly. Pixel noise? No, every frame to the horizon grew 1 degree lighter, as if the world had blinked. In that pulse of brightness, the trees leaned forward, all of them, toward the cottage. Then darkness returned, and the trees stood upright. I paused the timeline at the brightest frame. My own silhouette shimmered in the doorway, though I had not left. The shape wore my posture, my jacket, yet the hands were elongated, the fingers trailing thin as twigs. I shut the laptop. The cafe around me buzzed harmlessly, but I heard only soil shifting, roots stirring beneath tile and grout. Night 3, it rained in town, but the orchard met me bone dry. I touched a trunk. It was warm. I planted 2 microphones at ground level, cords snaking back into the cottage like veins. Inside, I sat amid coiled cables, headphones on, volume high. The noise floor hummed low. Hours passed. My eyelids threatened collapse. Then, faint, a lullaby. Wordless, carried by strings of cello deep wood resonance, it vibrated through the roots, not the air. Over it, the crying began anew, matching the lullaby's tempo, merging into a duet older than language. The headphones tightened like a noose. I yanked them off. Even without them, the melody persisted, vibrating through floorboards into bone. I stepped outside. Moonlight coated the orchard in tarnished silver. The trees swayed, not left and right now, but forward and back, bowing and rising, orchestrated by that hidden pulse. Between 2 trunks, a figure emerged, child tall, head down, hair clumped like wet straw. "Hello?" I said, throat raw. It looked up. No face, only bark, smooth as polished oak, where eyes and mouth should be. The crying came from it nonetheless, muffled as if buried under inches of wood. I could not move. Every instinct begged retreat, but roots twined around my boots, subtle as hands. The child shape raised one arm, joint cracking like snapping twigs. It pointed toward a cluster of older trees at the orchard's heart. Something there glowed faintly amber, pulsing. I stumbled forward. Each step found earth soft, almost sponge-like, releasing a scent of rot and sweet sap. Closer, the glow resolved into an opening at the base of a colossal trunk, a hollow too narrow for an adult but shaped like a doorway. Inside, shadows wriggled, converging, retreating, as if aware of inspection. The sobbing child walked ahead, knees bending with stiffness unnatural to flesh. It slipped inside the hollow, bark fingers brushing the edge. I dropped to my knees, peered inside. A chamber, lit by no source, stretched downward like an inverted well. The walls were not wood after all, but rows of tiny, clenched fists, roots curled into shapes of weeping children, their mouths sealed by bark. A surge of terror flung me backward. I hit the ground, breath tearing loose. All around, trunks leaned inward, their crowns blotting moonlight, a cathedral of grief closing overhead. I fled, or tried, each stride tangling in unseen vines, each gasp pincered by a lullaby swelling louder, until it filled every pocket of air. Somewhere behind, the hollow yawned wider, expelling a gust smelling of womb-warm darkness. I made the cottage, slammed the door. The latch splintered but held. All night, the orchard rocked the cottage, rhythmic as a cradle. Dust sifted from rafters. The sobs circled, drawing loops around walls, eaves, windows. I cowered in a corner, recorder gripped but useless. At dawn, when I dared open the door, every tree stood rigid, dew collecting like tears at their roots. I could not speak. My tongue felt braided with soil. I packed in silence, loaded the cameras into crates. As I drove away, rearview mirror showed the orchard shimmering, leaves lifting in a slow farewell. In town, I checked into a motel. Curtains drawn, lights out. I slept, dreamless, until dusk found me. The motel room vibrated gently. I thought it passing traffic until I remembered the road outside was dirt, seldom used. I rose, pressed ear to carpet. From beneath the floor, faint sobbing. I ran to the window. Beyond the parking lot, a thin line of saplings had sprouted since my arrival, impossibly fast, each crooked toward my door. I fled again, car tearing gravel. Miles dissolved. I stopped only when the fuel gauge threatened emptiness. The highway shoulder met a field. No orchards, only grass. I exhaled relief, stepped out, stretched cramped limbs. Then I heard it, carried on no wind, a child's sob. The grass swayed left, right, left, metronomic. I fell to my knees, hands over ears, the sound seeped through skin, through memory. A trucker found me at dawn, curled on asphalt, murmuring of trees and crying earth. He drove me to the city hospital where fluorescent lights could not chase the shadows from my eyes. Doctors asked for explanations. I offered none. Words cracked like brittle twigs in my throat. That night, the ward echoed with weeping. Patients stirred, nurses searched hallways, no source found. Security footage later revealed every plant in the building, potted ferns, flower arrangements bowing in sync, leaves trembling to the unseen sob. I was discharged into custody of a friend who took me home. We sat in his apartment, curtains open to city glow. Concrete, steel, neon, no orchards. Yet at midnight, the crying resumed, muffled by skyscrapers, pulsing through foundations. Glassware on shelves tinkled to the rhythm. My friend stared at me, fear widening his eyes. What did you bring back? I could only whisper. It followed because it was never the trees. The orchard was only its mouth. Days passed, the city grew restless. Reports of weeping heard in subway tunnels, alleys, office corridors. Trees in Central Park leaned in unison, though weather stations recorded still air. I watched news anchors tremble, their microphones picking up faint sobs no one in the studio could locate. Experts speculated mass hysteria. Sound engineers blamed frequency pollution. But I knew. Wherever I walked, planters wilted after I passed, soil damp as if watered by tears. I decided to end it. I booked a room on the 50th floor of a downtown hotel, high above any route. Night fell like a curtain of ash. Standing at the window, I looked down. Streetlights flickered. Beneath their amber glow, every tree along the boulevard bent upward, crowns aimed at my window. A lullaby rose through the glass, low, patient. My reflection darkened. Behind it, another form emerged, child height, face of bark, hollow where eyes belonged. It stood inside the room, though no door had opened. The crying swelled, but its posture held calm, almost expectant. I asked, "What do you want?" It raised a branch-thin finger, pointed to my chest. I felt roots unspooling within me, filaments threading bone, anchoring muscle. My heartbeat slowed, syncing with the lullaby's pulse. The city outside hushed as if holding breath. I understood then, the orchard needed caretakers, vessels to carry its grief beyond the boundaries of soil. The trees were singers, but we were the song. I knelt. The child shape touched my forehead. Bark seeped into skin. From the streets below, new voices rose, hundreds of them, joining the chorus. The city cried, and the buildings swayed to comfort it. Somewhere in fields and forests, trunks leaned closer, listening. I closed my eyes. Within the dark, roots reached endlessly, weaving a cradle for a sorrow older than dawn. And in that cradle, I rocked, humming the orchard's lullaby, forever in rhythm with the crying that would never, ever end. I do not remember falling asleep, only that I awoke to silence so complete it felt sharpened, like something had carved the quiet down to bone. The hotel room was unchanged, but something had shifted beneath the surface of it, beneath the paint, beneath the floor, beneath me. The bed had grown cold, not from draft or open window, but from absence. Absence of warmth, of breath, of presence, even my own. I stood slowly, hands trembling. The air no longer held weight. It felt like walking through abandoned space, untethered, unsupervised. I stepped to the mirror. My reflection moved, but not in tandem. Its motions were half a second late, like it waited for permission. It smiled. I did not. I stumbled back, hand catching the nightstand. The lamp flickered on its own. The reflection still smiled. Its eyes weren't mine. They were not rings in wood, still, empty, watching. I turned away, but behind my eyelids the image remained, carved into the soft underside of thought. I couldn't leave. I don't mean the door was locked. I mean the hallway was gone. I opened the door, and the threshold spilled into black. No walls, no carpet, only that thick, root-scented, dark breathing slow. I closed the door, and behind me the reflection nodded. I didn't scream. There was no one left to hear it. Somewhere below, in the cracks of the city's silence, the lullaby began again, so soft I could barely place it, so precise it cradled my nerves like fingers brushing harp strings. I lay on the bed, not in defeat, but in recognition. I was no longer part of anything. I had been taken out, smoothed, shaped, a seed. That's what I had become. Not metaphor, literal. Something inside me pulsed. Not blood, not heart, a rhythm from deeper. A language not spoken but hummed, a story not told but remembered by soil. And it was old. So old. The lullaby wove into me. I felt it twisting through my spine, down my arms, out through fingertips. My nails blackened, not from rot, from bark. I do not know how long I lay there, but when I next opened my eyes, the mirror was no longer glass. It was wood, polished, grain swirling where my face once was. It was not a reflection. It was a door, and something knocked from the other side. 3 times, slow, like a child hesitant to ask for something they know they shouldn't want. I stood, my limbs obeyed, but they were no longer entirely mine. They moved with practiced grace, like a marionette pulled by old, careful strings. I stepped toward the wooden surface. The grain shimmered. It moved, not physically, but in the shape of feeling. Grief. So much grief. Not loud, not dramatic, that quiet kind, the kind that folds clothes of the dead and places them back on the shelf. I touched the wood. It pulsed once and opened. Inside was not a forest, it was a memory, but not mine. Ah, it was a wide field long before the orchard, grass wild, sky low. In the center, a woman knelt, cradling something. A child, but the child was still, so still, no sound. Then the crying began, not from the child, but from the land itself. The woman placed the child into the earth, arms trembling, and covered him gently, lovingly. Her mouth opened, but no voice emerged, only the sobbing of roots. The field darkened, not with night, but with grief, and trees sprouted, one by one, each where a tear had fallen, and in every tree a memory was sealed, a sorrow, a song. I stepped forward, and the door closed behind me. The sky above me dimmed, pale clouds drifting like ash. The trees around me breathed. Yes, they breathed. And I felt them recognize me. Not welcome me, not threaten, just know me. They had been waiting. I walked for hours or maybe moments. Time in that place was unpinned. It hung like moss, swaying when I breathed. Eventually, I came upon a clearing. In its center, a stump, cleanly cut, as though something once vital had been removed. And there, beneath its roots, I saw movement. Not crawling, not scuttling, just shifting. Something buried, something still crying. I dropped to my knees. The earth was warm, it throbbed with sadness, and I wept. Not from fear, but because I knew. It had never been about haunting. It had never been about revenge. It was mourning, endless, directionless, wandering, waiting for someone, anyone, to carry the sound. So it followed us. The orchard was not cursed, it was sick with loss. And we kept planting our grief in it. The families, the caretakers, the silent witnesses. We made it worse. Not on purpose, but by forgetting. I pressed my ear to the stump and I listened. There was no lullaby this time, only breathing. Slow, steady, heavy. And beneath it, words. Not spoken, but imprinted. Stay. They hold this. Remember. I curled beside the roots and closed my eyes, and dreamed of orchards where the trees did not cry because someone finally stayed to listen. The sound followed me back. Of course it did. But it was quieter now. Less weeping, more breathing. I returned to the city. People looked at me differently. Some avoided my eyes, others stared too long. I spoke less, but when I did, people wept. Quietly, sometimes without knowing why. And then days later would tell me they dreamed of trees, always the same ones, always in rows. I began writing names in the soil wherever I walked. Names I didn't recognize, but the ground always responded. A shift, a sigh. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. The orchard had made sure of that. We are caretakers now. And when the crying starts, we don't run, we don't film, we don't bury, we listen. and we rock the world gently in return, like a cradle. Because sometimes the only thing you can offer to sorrow that old is to stay with it. The days don't move the way they used to, not since the orchard. Light still comes and goes, but it no longer signals anything. The sun rises, but my body doesn't stir until the crying does. It begins as it always has, soft, distant, behind the wall of memory, not real enough to disturb, but real enough to know it's still there. And now others are beginning to hear it. Not everyone, but enough. Neighbors who never spoke now knock at my door in the middle of the night. Their eyes are wet, though they haven't cried. They ask if I heard it too. I nod, and I let them in. We don't speak, we sit, we listen. It's never the same voice. Sometimes it's a boy with a chest cold, sometimes it's a girl who sounds like she's underwater, sometimes it's not even a child, sometimes it's something that never was, but still mourns its own absence. We listen until the sun returns, and when they leave, they always thank me, like I've done something. But all I did was keep the silence soft enough to hold the sound. They go back to their homes, and I see it in them afterward, that haunted stillness, that bend in the spine that wasn't there before. Some of them return, others don't. One woman came every night for a week, then one morning she left a note on my doorstep. It was made of bark, and the words were burned in, not written. I dreamed I was a tree, it said, not dead, just patient. I never saw her again. The city's begun to change. The buildings creak like branches now. Concrete bends ever so slightly, like something underneath is breathing. There's a new smell in the air. Not rot, not mold. Something sweeter, sadder. Sap, maybe. Children have stopped playing in the parks, not because they're afraid, because they listen. They sit in circles, quiet, ears turned to the dirt. They say the ground hums. One boy told his teacher the swing set was crying. She laughed, but when she sat on it, it groaned beneath her. Not from weight, from grief. The children don't swing anymore. They rock, forward and back, in rhythm. Somewhere far away, another orchard is waking up. I can feel it. They're spreading, not like a plague, like a memory returning. We tried so hard to forget. We built cities to drown the sound. We paved over the earth's heartbeat. But sorrow doesn't die in silence. It waits. And now it's singing again. A man approached me on the subway platform. He looked ordinary. Gray coat, briefcase, tired eyes. But his hands were covered in soil. He said, "I saw you in my dream." I nodded. He asked, "Is it too late?" I didn't answer. There was nothing to answer. He dropped his briefcase. Roots had already begun to grow from it, curling toward the tiles. He walked past the yellow line and stepped into the darkness of the tunnel. I didn't stop him. The train never came. That tunnel is closed now. But people say, if you lean close to the gate, you can hear a child sobbing in time with the flicker of the fluorescent lights. I've stopped sleeping, not out of fear, out of responsibility. When I close my eyes, I feel the trees leaning everywhere, in alleyways, in cracks of sidewalks, in rooftop gardens, listening, waiting. And I know what they're waiting for. They want me to return, not to the orchard, to the source. It calls to me now in my bones, a low sound like thunder underwater, a voice made of roots and remembrance. I walk the city at night, tracing paths where no one goes. My fingers brush walls, poles, bricks. Each time I feel the pulse, faint but growing stronger. The orchard is no longer a place, it's becoming a condition, a frequency, a resonance of sorrow so precise it reshapes the spaces it enters. And it has entered me. I don't speak much anymore. When I do, the words echo longer than they should. They bend the light around them. A man asked for directions yesterday. I said left. He turned left. There was no street there, only a single tree. He walked to it, touched the trunk, and wept. I kept walking. These things happen now, often, and the more they happen, the more I understand. We are not haunted. We are remembered by the places we tried to forget, by the grief we left behind. And the orchard, it remembers everything. I've started writing again, not words, not letters, rings. Circles inside circles, carved into wood, drawn in dirt. Each one holds a season, each one holds a cry. And when I finish one, I hear a sigh, hear a somewhere in the world something has let go. I don't know how many there are to make, but I will make them until the orchard finally sleeps, until the crying ends, until the silence no longer watches back. And only then will I rest. The sky this evening is the color of bleached bone, and the wind has forgotten every name it ever carried. Beneath that hollow light, I begin the walk, out of the city, beyond the thinning suburbs, toward the broken horizon where wires sag like tired veins. The sidewalks end sooner than they should. Grass pushes through asphalt seams, coaxed upward by something deeper than thirst. No cars pass, no dogs bark. Even the insects hold their wings in a hush of anticipation. With each step, the pavement cools, as if dawn's warmth was never here. I trail my fingers along chain link fences, and they vibrate, soft, persistent, a tuning fork struck somewhere far below. I know the sound now. How could I not? It has scored every dream since the orchard swallowed the last of my doubt. Ahead, a cul-de-sac ends in open field. At its center stands a lamppost, unlit, though dusk has already slipped over the rooftops. The pole is wrapped in creeping ivy that wasn't there yesterday. I touch a leaf. It is warm, pulsing faintly, as though photosynthesis has been replaced by heartbeat. In the distance, a billboard tilts, half collapsed. A real estate ad, smiling families, fruit baskets on porches, a slice of the life we thought we wanted. But the smiling mouths have darkened, paint lifted by weather or something more intentional until they resemble hollows in bark. I leave the road and cross the field. The grass parts for me, bending in small waves that linger after I pass. A single crow flutters overhead, silent, shadowing my path. Its wings beat in time with the rhythm rising underfoot. Left, pause, right, pause, a metronome guiding grief. Night settles without ceremony, a velvet weight pushed against my shoulders. Yet I see clearly. The darkness glows from within itself, tinted by the faint amber I remember from the hollow beneath the great trunk. I reach a wire fence that once protected an orchard of its own, long since raised for development that never came. Only stumps remain, level with the soil, rings exposed like open throats. I crawl through a tear in the mesh and step among the scars. Here the crying is thinner, frayed, as if stretched across distance, but it is here. I kneel beside a stump, the rings flicker under moonlight, each line a pulse. I press my palm to the core. It answers, not with words, not even with song, but with memory. A market day, decades ago, laughter between stalls, apples piled high, a child running, skinned knee, comfort of a mother's hush. Then wildfire smoke, sirens, empty fields, silence. Every tree remembers. And every absence is a wound that never closed. I whisper, I'm still listening. From the stump, a thread of heat winds up my arm, settles behind my eyes. The world tilts, not violently, but with the certainty of a door closing. When I stand, roots have surfaced around my shoes, tangling but not restraining, guiding. They draw a path toward the far edge of the field where a lone sapling shivers. It shouldn't be alive. The soil is ash dry, split like parched lips, yet its leaves gleam slick with unseen dew. The sapling sways left and right, saluting an invisible conductor. I mirror the motion. Left, right. A lullaby seeps from the ground, low as distant thunder. It threads through marrow, unspooling the last knots of resistance. The sapling bows, bark peels back along its slender trunk, slow as a yawn, revealing pale wood that glows with inner dusk. A hollow forms, child-sized, familiar. From within, a breath drifts, smelling of ancient rain trapped in sealed cellars. I know what waits inside. Not a creature, not even a presence. A promise, unfinished, unfulfilled. I step forward. The hollow widens to welcome, to consume, the difference immaterial. Inside, darkness curves, a tunnel spiraling down like the inside of a shell. The wood pulses with each of my heartbeats, a call and response older than language. I descend. The air grows warm, then humid, then thick with the scent of apples rotting and blooming at once. Walls of living grain ripple beside me, carved with faces blurred by time. Mouths agape, eyes shut, they breathe in unison. They do not weep. Their sorrow has become function as lungs become breathing. At the tunnel's end, a cavern opens, vast, roof lost in darkness. Roots dangle like chandeliers. each tipped with a glowing tear of resin that falls, shattering silently on the floor. Those drops gather into rivulets, then streams, feeding a pool that lies perfectly still, inky, reflective, bottomless. I kneel at its edge. My reflection shows what the mirror hinted months ago: skin fissured with bark veins, irises ringed in soft amber. But within the pool, another layer surfaces, faces overlapping mine, hundreds deep, each a life touched by the orchard's hush. They watch, not pleading, not accusing, simply waiting for their turn to breathe again. A ripple distorts the image. From the depths rises a figure of wood and shadow, child height, featureless except for those knot eyes that saw me in the hotel glass. It reaches a hand, twig thin, trembling. I take it. Contact is soundless, but the world above answers. I feel the city's streets shudder. Windows tremble. Somewhere a siren cuts short, replaced by quiet sobs. The figure guides my hand to the pool. Fingertips touch the surface. It parts like warm breath, drawing me through. Submerged, I hear every voice at once. Each orchard, each stump, each uprooted memory. They overlap, a polyphony of grief so immense it becomes calm. Images flicker, forests leveled for railroads, playgrounds paved atop burial grounds, seedlings burned for convenience, cut timber stacked like corpses in open air. The sorrow is not accusation, it is acknowledgement, record keeping, an archive of neglect, hardbound in sap. In the midst of that flood, a question forms. Simple, vast. Will you carry us? I do not speak an answer, I only keep holding the figure's hand, and in that silence my choice engraves itself in every root. The pool expels me gently. I stand dripping resin that sinks into the cavern floor, and where each drop lands a seed sprouts, unfolding in moments into a luminous fern. The figure releases my hand and steps back. Its form blurs, seeping into the roots overhead, joining the vast lattice of memory. I understand now. I am the hinge between worlds, a bridge of quiet flesh willing to bend beneath the weight of ancient weeping. The cavern dims, the way back opens, tunnel glowing faint. I ascend. When I emerge, dawn stains the horizon, the pale pink of bandaged skin. The field is transformed. Where stumps once gaped, saplings sway in tidy rows, leaves rustling though no wind stirs. Their rhythm follows my pulse. Slow, steady. An orchard rebuilt not by hand, but by witness. Behind me, the lone sapling seals its hollow, bark knitting like stitched flesh. Its work is done. I walk back toward the city. Each step plants echoes of root, unseen yet certain. In cracks of sidewalks, new shoots appear, thin but resilient, their leaves trembling to a lullaby only I and the quiet can hear. People emerge from doorways, eyes bleary, cheeks wet. Yet there is peace in them that wasn't there before, like a fever broken. They watch me pass and nod, not in greeting, but in recognition, as if a forgotten melody has finally found its refrain. Some fall in step behind me, silent procession heading nowhere and everywhere. We walk streets newly softened, concrete creaking less like stone, more like soil remembering how to give. At the city square, the oldest oak stands solitary, fenced by benches and plaques. Children once climbed it, now it stands brittle, half dead. I approach, place my hand upon its cracked bark. A sigh moves through branches, shaking the last brown leaves free. But instead of emptying, the tree begins to bud, tiny green tongues unfurling along each limb, urgent, alive. Gasps ripple through the gathered crowd. Some kneel, some weep. Some simply close their eyes and listen as the leaves whisper their slow hello. I step back. The oak no longer needs me. Across the city, other trees answer, elm, maple, sycamore, shivering in unison, a soft applause of foliage. Cars halt mid-intersection. Drivers lean out, stunned by the sudden hush. In apartment windows, faces appear, lit by morning gold, tears catching light like dew. The crying that haunted nights has changed timbre. It is softer now, dispersed, the edge of pain blunted by recognition. I feel it settling, a child soothed by lullaby, drifting toward uneasy sleep. But I also feel what comes next, for grief never ends, it only changes hands. So I keep walking beyond the square toward neighborhoods I have never seen, where trees stand mute and waiting. Every so often, I pause, lay palm to trunk, and share the resonance carried in marrow. Where the tree is too young, I kneel, press fingers into soil, and hum the song I learned beneath the sapling's hollow. Roots respond, curling like newborn fists, anchoring possibility. And the people follow, some bearing shovels, some seeds, most only their open silence. Together we move, slow tide of intention overtaking avenues, filling vacant lots with seedlings that drink memory like rain. I don't know how long this will take, years, lifetimes, epochs, it doesn't matter. The orchard is awake now, everywhere, and I am its witness, its lullaby, its restless dream. When dusk comes, I will pause, feel the earth breathe under streetlights, and listen for the sob that started it all. If I hear it, I will stay. If I don't, I will still stay. Because the silence is no longer watching back. It is watching with. And until every forgotten root is heard, until every seed finds grief enough to grow, there will be no rest. But there will be patient, endless rocking, the world cradled at last in its own remembered song. The seasons change more subtly now. The trees do not drop their leaves all at once. Instead, they let them go when the time is right, one by one, like a procession of quiet farewells. Each leaf that falls carries a small sound with it, a breath, a sob, a memory. You wouldn't notice unless you were listening, really listening. The city has learned how to do that. Where once sirens and horns ruled the nights, now there is hush. People walk softer, speak slower. They pause more often to look up or down or inward. The streets are still busy. The world did not stop, but it has changed key. Every building has a planter now, not because someone mandated it, because people began bringing pieces of the orchard back with them. A sprig of bark, a seed tucked into a pocket, a leaf that hummed when held under the right light. Some tried to explain it, said it was mass suggestion, a psychological phenomenon, a cultural echo. They weren't wrong, but they weren't right either, because sometimes explanation is just a more elaborate way to avoid awe. I have begun to forget who I was before, not out of loss, out of peace. The name I carried no longer fits. It belonged to someone who lived behind mirrors and thresholds, someone who heard crying and mistook it for danger. Now I hear it for what it is, the first voice, the rawest truth. I do not need sleep anymore. I close my eyes when I want to listen more deeply. The dreams I enter now are not my own. They belong to the trees. Their dreams are slow and vast, and they do not end. They bloom in darkness, stretch across generations. They remember the child buried in the orchard's heart. They remember the mother's hands, the lullaby unsung. But now, they also remember me, and others. Caretakers are sprouting everywhere, not marked by uniform or title, but by stillness, by the way they carry silence like a candle. You can spot them if you look. They linger in graveyards after the services end. They sit by fountains long emptied. They hum to the trees that grow between cracks in forgotten walls. Some of them are children, some of them are old beyond telling. Some of them were once like me, and some are still becoming. The orchard spreads through them, not as possession, but as permission. To feel, to weep, to stay. I no longer walk with urgency. There is no destination now, only the path. One morning, I stepped into a park that had not existed the day before. Where once stood concrete and broken glass, now rose a grove. Not large, but precise. The trees knew each other, their roots braided underfoot. In the center stood a single bench, carved with rings like the trunks. I sat. Birds did not sing, but the wind did. And beneath my feet, the ground exhaled. I knew then it was time, not to end, but to rest. The crying had quieted, not vanished, not silenced, just comforted. It would always be there, because the world will always grieve. But it no longer wept alone. I laid down on the bench. The wood welcomed me, held me. My breath slowed, matched the sway of the leaves. Above me, the canopy thickened, not to darken, to shield. Roots curled beneath the bench, lifting it ever so slightly, cradling me. Somewhere far away, a new orchard stirred. Its trees leaned, waiting. But not for me. They were listening for another voice, another witness. Someone else would hear the crying, and they too would stay. Because grief is not meant to be buried, it is meant to be planted, and from it, something patient and beautiful and deeply human can grow. I closed my eyes, and the orchard sighed.